Hello, everybody. Welcome, welcome, welcome. I am so excited. You can't even understand how excited I am because this is October 4th, 2020, and we are at the beginning of the very first Black in Science Communication Week celebration. And just as I've shared, this is a celebration. And not only is it a celebration, it's also a retreat and a special opportunity for the science community to focus on amplifying Black voices in science communication and provide resources to improve the practices of science communicators and build new science communicators into our communities. My name is Raven Baxter. I am also known as Raven the Science Maven on the internet, and I am the founder of Black in Science Communication. And I want to tell you a little bit about why I started BISC, which is what we're going to call it, BISC, Black in SciComm for short. BISC started out of my awareness that there was a true need for a recentering and a refreshing of Black voices in the science communication community. This year has been very trying for many people across the spectrum of diversity in age, in ethnicity, nationality, and abilities, and we are struggling. We are experiencing a pandemic right now. We are in the middle of an uprising in the civil rights movement and the human rights movement, and our voices are becoming a little bit tired. We're fighting the good fight, but that doesn't come at no cost, okay? And so Black in Science Communication is meant to amplify Black voices, but also provide a space for us to get back to business and recenter. And we want to pour into our community so that we can remember that our voices are used for many reasons, but if we are in SciComm, we are also passionate about science communication and building and healing our communities. And that is why we are gathered here this week. We are so excited for all the programming that we're sharing with you and that we've organized for you. And just as I've spoken on how we are focused on building and healing communities, we have today Beverly A. Hutcherson. And let me tell you, I'm so excited that she is here to speak. Beverly, I've heard her speak on a couple of occasions, and I've had one-on-one conversations with Beverly. And I kid you not, every time I speak with her, I have chills. She gives me goosebumps. I get some type of feeling, the vibes are just incredible. And it is a gift to me to be here and introducing her today. And it is a treat and gift to you as a viewer to be here listening to her message. As a biologist, Beverly seeks to apply her knowledge in a community education format. She is committed to uplifting and empowering her community. She conducts a variety of motivational speaking and conscious parenting workshops, having navigated a variety of science, outreach, administrative, and allied healthcare positions. She is excited to share her experiences in supporting the next generation of STEM and clinical healthcare workers. Academically, Beverly holds a Bachelor of Science in Biology from Marquette University, a graduate training in Sustainability, Leadership, and Social Innovation from Edgewood College, and is completing her Master of Science in Reproductive Endocrinology, Physiology at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. She is the recipient of the Honored Instructor Award from UW-Madison, Isaac Cogs Award from the Beta Omicron Chapter, Kappa Alpha Psi, the 2017 Outstanding Woman of Color Award from UW-Madison, the 2018 Wisconsin Women in Government Rising Star Award, and the 2019 Wholehearted Service Award from the Gamma Epsilon Chapter of Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated. I want to, before we bring on our guests, give a special thank you to our sponsors, the Chan Zuckerberg Initiative, Compass SciComm, as well as Diverse SciComm, and our wealth of anonymous donors who have taken it taken our cause in Black and science communication near and dear to their hearts so that we can operate this wonderful week and also compensate people for their hard work. So thank you so much for our sponsors. And without further delay, I bring to you the woman of the hour, opening up our week with Beyond the Degree, using our training to build and heal our communities, Beverly A. Hutcherson. Hello, Beverly. How are you?
Hi, Raven. Thank you so much. I mean, that was such a wonderful introduction. I'm blushing.
Well, you know what? We're about to make you blush some more because we are a huge fan. I'm a huge fan. I can't wait for other people to hear what you have to say. So I'm going to jump off this platform. I'm going to turn it on to you.
All right. Thank you. Thank you. A special thank you to Raven for inviting me to speak today. And as I was meditating over what to share today, given everything that we are living through these very trying times, and some of what I've been learning on social media about people who are younger than myself and how they're viewing themselves in academic and in corporate spaces, I really wanted to address those things. And so we're going to kind of walk through it, and I'm going to address it through walking through my journey. So on this, YouTube national platform, I'm going to be a bit vulnerable because I think it's important for me to not talk at you, but to really share with you who I am, how I got to the space where I'm going, and so that you can hopefully see yourself in that pathway and that you can identify with pieces of that journey so that you don't feel that you don't belong in a space that you are in, but that you are called to that space. So just a bit of an overview. It's one of my favorite slides. Whenever I am frustrated with the time that it's taking me to complete these goals, I look at the slide and I say, not bad from a little girl from the hood. And so Marquette University was the beginning, and I felt like going to Marquette University prepared me for the stage that I'm in, because it was 1998 when I started, but the atmosphere on the campus was more like 1964 with race relations. And I felt like if I could survive in that space, there was nothing I couldn't survive in. And then I continued on my education, all at predominantly white institutions. And you'll see how that plays out in my perspective on how we need to walk through these pathways, being mindful of the scars, often called microaggressions, but I don't believe there's anything micro about the experiences that we are having. And so we come through our degrees a bit scarred, definitely not unscathed. And it is not enough to just accomplish external things. We've got to do some internal work. And so I highlight for you, if you look, you'll see the lamprey, which was the first animal model I was able to use in order to do research. I was doing neuroscience research at Marquette University under the tutelage of Dr. James Buchanan, and that opened my world. I didn't even know what research was actually until I became a Ronald E. McNair Scholar, and I realized I was smart, and I love solving problems. And from that point on, my interest and focus in science just grew. I did not have the typical undergraduate experience for a variety of different reasons. One, I had to work my way through school. I was largely homeless during college. And so I had to really work for real. And so I would either be working or in the laboratory until midnight trying to figure out how to do electrophysiology. I mean, that was my college experience. Education was my escape. It was my way out. It was my ticket out from what I was born into. And in a few minutes, I'll talk about the beginnings of me. But I highlight these things because this is what we present to the world when we are an academic person. We present our external accomplishments. And if you go to our social media, we present all of the joy and all of the wins. And we leave out certain parts of our journey. And I'm going to argue that those parts that we omit are the parts that are shaping our mind and our hearts towards the work that we are doing. So as science communicators, I see us specifically as the bridge builders. I capitalize bridge, I capitalize builder. because our communities need us, but our institutions need us as well. But beyond those external accomplishments, we are whole people with whole stories. And sometimes we shy away from pieces of that story. And so I decided today I'm going to share things I hadn't really shared about my story, because it's super easy to get caught up in the bio and the accomplishments. But where did I start? And so I have an image, the first images of my mom and my dad. My beginnings, they was definitely not ready for the things I was trying to do in my life. My pops was out in these streets. and we have learned to this point now that clearly my mom has an undiagnosed mental illness based on some of the things that we experienced growing up. I share that for the first time ever in this public stage, because I know that I'm not the only one who has struggled with a parent who clearly is dealing with some things deeper within herself. And those were defining moments in my life. And then you have in the center, that's my dad. I was a daddy's girl. And unfortunately, I lost my father 5 days before my 14th birthday, 5 days after my 14th birthday. And that was the end of celebrating birthdays for me. To this day, haven't celebrated a birthday until this year, actually, when I turned 40, because it was really hard to walk through that. But that was also a defining moment in my life, because I knew at that point, my dad died because no one knew how to navigate healthcare for him. At 44 years old, he had a heart attack. He was having a heart attack for 5 days, but none of us had the knowledge to communicate with him about his health and to be the liaison for him while he was in the emergency room to communicate with the healthcare provider. And so a preventable loss occurred that catapulted me into reading every anatomy book, every biology book, every book that I could to become knowledgeable about the human body, because I was determined to not have that happen again. And unfortunately, I buried several family members to preventable illnesses, specifically to heart disease, that we now know, as I've educated myself, that we develop a protein in our blood that makes it harder for us to process cholesterol, even if our cholesterol is normal. And this is why I lost most of my paternal family. So when I think about science education, that began in my home. I had to, at 14 years old, 15 years old, be the liaison for my family in healthcare because I didn't want to keep burying them. And then another defining moment, as you see, is my son. My son is now 16. And I had him my first year of graduate school. And I'll talk about how that impacted my trajectory. Our academic programs are not necessarily designed for parents, let alone a single parent. And so I have struggled to accomplish my goals. But every struggle was worth it, because I have just like a great home and an amazing kid, but it definitely came at a cost to my career trajectory. And so I was born into poverty and violence in the inner city, dodging bullets, going to the bus stop, in the kitchen, all of that. I grew up in all of that. I mentioned how my dad passed after my 14th birthday. The other thing that is often hidden from my story is that I was a heavily abused child, physically, mentally, and emotionally. I currently have permanent damage to some of my neuromuscular areas of my body from being beaten so severely. And I navigate quite a few health issues as a result of that childhood. Why is that important to share now? It's important for me because as I talk about healing our community, I think it's important for us to recognize that we as individuals are members of that community, and that we can't heal anybody until we heal ourselves. And so for me, that journey of healing from the abuse took years and years and years of therapy, reworking and rewiring. And that work really began when I became pregnant with my son, and I had a determination not to pass down those generational curses for my son. I was determined to allow him to grow up in peace, in wellness. I was determined to have him to grow knowing that love was an abundant resource. And in order for me to do that, I had to do the serious work on myself. I was also the first in my family to go to college, the first to attend graduate school. And then I have my son, the first year of graduate school. That was not a welcome event in my department. And then as you move forward in graduate school, my graduate project failed. miserably. I was doing primate work, and we had perimenopausal monkeys, and we were trying to procure their follicles from their ovary, and it's hard to do when they're perimenopausal. And so I lost my funding. Right after that, I got really sick, and I ended up having to have major surgeries where I lost a couple of organs. And then afterwards was diagnosed with some lifelong health issues that I currently battle today. And in the midst of all of that, I was unemployed off and on. And that is important because it was in that darkest hour, in that poorest moment, where I actually, my career as a science educator blossomed. It was what I did to manage my mental and emotional well-being. So while I was prestigiously broke, still at a university, struggling to survive in a one-bedroom apartment with my son, I would take the little gas that I had over to whatever place would have me and start teaching reproductive biology through Planned Parenthood, because I realized that the struggles that I had just had with my health was information that my community needed, and that I was not the only one struggling with this. I survived, and I could have died, but I survived because I was a graduate student under the internationally top-ranked biologist and an OBGYN who were able to guide me through those health problems and tell me which surgeries I need and what tests I took. And I realized that many people who were racially congruent with myself did not have those resources. And so I started at welfare offices, at people's homes, at wherever I was sent, schools, high schools, and started teaching the science of reproductive wellness. And from that, I started getting paid speaking gigs. I redefined myself. And in that service, I found peace, even in the midst of the hardest struggles that I was having. And so here I am in the city raising my child alone, navigating several other deaths that are happening in my family. And here I am developing and redefining myself as I had to stop graduate school for a period of time to manage my wellness, to then get income so that we can get back on our feet, dig out of that hole. And in that, my world grew, even in the midst of that dark hour. And I developed this personal mission statement. And I encourage you, if you don't have one, to develop one. And I had to develop a mission statement that wasn't contingent on my terminal degree. And so my life's mission has been, from that time to now, to bridge the gap between the biomedical community and the public, and to begin creating curriculum for the public that hit 5 points that I feel like people don't have when they enter into their healthcare appointments, which was understanding their reproductive health with no shame, recognizing that it is just an organ system like any other system, puberty, hygiene, and adolescence for the young people so that they can become healthcare consumers, understanding microbiology. That became an issue because I kept noticing that people from different communities weren't taking all of their antibiotics, which we know leads to super bugs and reoccurrence. Medical terminology so that people could understand what their healthcare provider was saying to them, and basic anatomy and physiology. I met educated people who didn't know where their parts were. And I felt like I could do something about that. I could do something about that with the bachelor's degree that I have, with the graduate training that I had, whether or not I had the PhD or the MD or any of that. And then I start thinking about what my dream job would be and training in those things. So I'd already been trained in research. I began teaching. And then, as I'll talk about shortly, I began training in administration. Because that is where I learned I had the biggest gap in knowledge. And so as I reinvented myself and had to step away from the laboratory, I was fortunate enough to be part of a small team at our academic medical enterprise to start building a new department, a department that was designed to bring in diverse candidates for training at all levels in the institution. In that space, I learned that I was able to use my scientific knowledge to build and design pathways for underserved populations in institutions, and that I was really good at it. And that I was a huge problem solver and could solve problems really swiftly, and was recruited by Dr. Brian Gittens over to the training part of the academic medical enterprise, the School of Medicine and Public Health, to essentially do the same thing under his umbrella as he was expanding his work as the Dean of HR, Equity, and Inclusion. And then I subsequently became the administrative director of our first ever K through 12 program that is a branch from Dr. Cricklow at University of Minnesota, Twin Cities, the latter. It was in the administrative change training that I learned that I knew very, very little about how institutions operate. I was able to identify a lot of problems that I saw with being the first only female in my training environment. But I didn't know how to do anything about it. In administration, I learned if I sit back a little bit, if I just observe, that I would begin to understand the infrastructure that makes up academia, that makes up our healthcare system. And I was able to train by the CEO. I was able to train by the deans of the medical
Beverly,
school.
can you hear me?
And then I was able to use my biological training as a systems thinker of inputs and outputs to begin to design the solutions on a grand scale for institutions. So actions, science report in a mutable way, in a trustworthy way, so that they are able and ready to consume the information that they can apply in the situations that they are living through in order to elevate themselves out of those situations that they are in. So this is truly about bi-directional influence. Now, these are the scientists who train me. If you notice, they are not racially or gender congruent with myself. And one would immediately assume that this was a negative experience for me. But I would argue this was really important for me to have this experience. Number one, I really needed to heal from my issues with white people. I had been through so much. I was so angry, and I couldn't hear them. I couldn't hear critique. I couldn't hear anything from them. I was just so angry. And I imagine that's where many of us are as we are living through the things that we are living through. And so through this training with all three of them, developing relationships with these three amazing scientists, I learned to hear. I learned that they were hard on me because I represented them. I learned that they wanted me to be the best. And so they did not give me any wiggle room or any slack. And at first I thought it was because of race. I thought it was because of gender. And through relationship with them, I really realized that it was because they didn't want me out here in these academic streets misrepresenting them after they had worked so hard to get what they had. And so through my healing, being able to hear from them, I actually became better scientists because I was listening, taking the critique and applying it. Each one of these men were not just mentors, but they became sponsors. I want to offer you something about the difference between mentorship and sponsorship. And so what I find in the diverse community communities, we tend to focus a lot on mentorship, and mentorship is important. You do need people to guide you along the way. But I rarely hear us talking about sponsorship. And sponsorship is when people have access and power and they use it for your benefit. And there's some research out there that talks about anyone on your personal advisory board powerful enough to sponsor you in moving your career forward. Now, my current academic advisor, Dr. David Abbott, has been that and is currently doing that for a side project that we are working on, leveraging his position as an international powerhouse on polycystic ovary syndrome to usher me into those spaces, as well as what I received from my former supervisor, Dr. Brian Gittins, to use his position to sponsor me, to position me so that when he moved on, who is now Vice Chancellor, University of Arkansas Medical School, he positioned me very well to lead in the space in his absence. So the question I ask you is, do you have a sponsor? Do you have people in your circle who can sponsor you and position you to lead in spaces where we're often not seen, heard, or recognized? If you do not have one, it's important for you to research that and to find people who will sponsor you, because that carries a different weight than mentorship. So what is our purpose? So we're going to get into the weeds of what we are here to do as science communicators. Well, I believe that we are here to elevate our communities, to decrease health disparities, to eradicate the achievement gap, to increase diversity in science, technology, engineering, mathematics, and medicine, innovate with our unique lenses. Important for us to ask the questions that are relevant to our populations through our research and in spaces where we represent our communities at these tables. Absolutely dismantle white supremacy, racism, and patriarchy, to learn how to influence the influencers. And while we might not have the power, how do we influence those who are in powerful positions? I believe that it is critical for us to highlight the historic and the current contributions from our people in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. One of the issues that bothers me when I hear young people talking about this concept of an imposter syndrome is the intentionality that is done by institutions by omitting the historical contributions of Black and Brown people in this country. We have been in science. We are scientists. We came through slavery as scientists, and before slavery, we were scientists. We've been doctors in our community. But when you walk in our institutions, you rarely see us anywhere on the walls. When you read our textbooks, you rarely see our pictures and our contributions to science. In fact, my research, the foundation of my research, comes from Dr. Everett Ernest Just, co-founder of Omega Psi Phi Fraternity Incorporated. He found how cells cleave. You never see him in any textbooks, but there is no Beverly without Dr. Just. His research is the foundation of what we understand in reproductive biology. And so it's important for us in all of our spaces to learn about who we are and the contributions to science, to make sure that young people understand that their intelligence has been present. We have been doing this. This ain't new. Even when they wouldn't let us in the door, Dr. Vivian Thomas, who taught surgeons, who wasn't able to become a surgeon himself, we persevered even when we didn't have terminal degrees, even when we weren't allowed terminal degrees. And so when you understand the richness, the intelligence, the power for which we come, there's no room for imposter syndrome, because you know you belong there, that you are called to that space, and that it is an honor to be the first, only, and few, that you are carrying the torch that was passed to you to walk forward and to open doors and to make innovations for our community, from our community, and to redesign those systems towards inclusion. So it's not just projects and programs, We've got to redesign the whole damn thing because it was never designed for us, but we can redesign it so that it can include us. This is our purpose. But some details have to go into accomplishing these things as science communicators. We have a responsibility to master language. Too often, we hear that Black people are more likely to insert anything negative, most likely to die of this, more likely to go to jail, and that Black people are least likely to insert something that would be positive, home ownership, get a terminal degree, succeed in academia. That is a problematic approach, and I believe an intentional approach, because I believe that most of our oppression is intentionally designed to be psychological warfare. And so I'm encouraging us as science communicators to rethink our language, because as Dr. Maya Angelou says, that she believed that words were things, and that when we spoke them, they got into the carpet and the drapes and they begin to manifest. And so when we think about the power of language, when we think about how we talk about ourselves with all of the air quote data that is out there that defines a generation of how they see themselves as potentially being successful, and that even when we are in these spaces, we are questioning whether we should be there, it's because we have been inundated with language that tells us that we are most likely to do something negative and the least likely to do something positive. And so we, as scientists, we must manage the nuance in race-based data presentation. We have to understand the audience that is receiving this information. So I got a few questions that I think we should ask ourselves about the audiences when we are presenting the data. So I understand we want people to understand the plight of us in this country. I get that. But I'm going to argue that the people who are listening are not necessarily hearing your heart and may not have a context for the history that led to the outcome. And so for some people, you've got to ask, how much training do they have? Because when people hear a lot of race-based data, particularly around health issues, they don't necessarily know that race isn't biological. We assume that they understand that this is happening because of the conditions that we are in. But that is not true. People don't always know that race isn't biological. That is something you learn in the institution, right? Through anthropology, through sociology. But for other people, they don't know that when you say that Black people are more likely to have diabetes or heart disease, that you're not saying it's their Blackness causing those things. So we have a responsibility to think through and ask ourselves, how much training do we have? How much explanation should I give? How much context should I give before I put this information out into the world? The other question I have, particularly for the white people who are listening to this data, or the non-diverse people listening to the data, how much historical knowledge or context do they possess? Because if this is the only introduction they have to our community, and we are inundating these people who have no real context for the beauty of who we are, the diversity of who we are, the power in who we are, and we keep telling them what's wrong with us. Every data point is what's wrong with us, how we fail. That is who we are to them, because that's who we are telling them we are. So I'm going to challenge that we think about, when we present this data, the audience that's listening and what unintended consequences might happen. What's the goal of sharing that information? Are you trying to get them to understand? Do you want them to care about us? Like, ask yourself, why am I presenting this? When we present race-based data, we often present it up against white. White is then seen as the norm. White is then seen as the control. And the data shows how we deviate from whiteness. So we have to ask ourselves in these institutions, as we use these tools that were created, that were never created to be inclusive, that were never created to elevate us, are the tools that we are trained in sometimes tools of oppression? And I'm going to challenge that. And I know that's hard when that's what you've been doing. But I do think that if we want to see change, we've got to challenge even what we think we know and how we were trained, because white supremacy racism is woven into the fabric of academia. And so we have to ask ourselves these hard questions. And the other thing is, if you're going to present race-based data, Can you explain the mechanism beyond the correlation? If you cannot, I want you to think about how to present that data within context. Because what I am seeing now, and I say this because I just did a class with first year medical students, and one of the white medical students stayed after 15 minutes because she just couldn't get past race as a factor, that race was a causation, and it is not. It is not because we are Black or because we are Indigenous or because we are Latinx. It is because of the conditions by which race has been used that has led to these outcomes. But she didn't have that context. All she knew is that all of her life, she had heard that we were more likely to have this. And so therefore, in her mind, race was the cause. And so I want us to think through, how do we present this data, understanding the nuance in a way that doesn't show the world just the negativity of who we are, and then wonder why that's how they see us. So I ask you to ask yourself, before I present this, is there an asset-based approach that can be used? And if you're going to show our struggle, can you show where we thrive? We ain't struggling everywhere. So are there places for which maybe we're struggling in the inner city of this, but we're thriving over in another space, to show the contrast? Be cautious not to deliver a singular narrative. And then I also want to offer you to think about the babies, our babies, who are hearing this about who they are. They are most likely to go to jail, the cradle to jail pipeline, but they're least likely to succeed. Our babies don't understand all of this, but we are often not intentionally telling them that they won't succeed, but that is what the babies hear. So when we think about who's hearing the data, should they hear this? Is there another way to talk about this? And I just want to challenge us with that. And we think about science communication, that we think about the impact of the listeners, the variety of different listeners, when they hear this negative data about our community. I want us to think about language, that we highlight the barrier. So being Black is not my barrier. Systemic racism is the barrier. Being a woman isn't my barrier. Patriarchy is. Being LGBTQ plus isn't the barrier. Homophobia and transphobia is the barrier. Being low income isn't the barrier. Historical disenfranchisement is the barrier. Being disabled isn't my barrier. Ableism is. So when we think about healing ourselves, we've got to think about how our language harms, but that our language can heal. So when we identify the barrier, make sure you're not naming yourself as the barrier. My Blackness is beautiful. My womanness is powerful. None of those things are my issue. Just because I was born poor isn't the problem. I was born poor because I was come from people who have spent hundreds of years trying to survive in a country that was never designed for them to be more than indentured servants. So when you think about that, how can you alter your language so that you are highlighting the actual ism and not the person? We're going to shift a little bit in the conversation to really get personal. A degree may get you in the door, but it will not keep you there. I know that we want to bring our whole self into these spaces, and maybe one day that will be true, but that is not the case in 2020. And I know that we wish that it were, but that is not the case at this time. So you have to understand and know that there are going to be limitations in the spaces that you walk. It is not right, it is not fair, but it is reality. And there are going to be compromises that you are going to have to make as you battle through your degree and your appointments in these institutions. And so my urge to you is to choose your battles wisely. So the number one thing is to remember that they are paying us to produce excellent product. So be excellent first. Make sure that you are excellent first, because when you are excellent, it's harder to discredit other things going on. And I want you to think about the longevity of your projection and your mental and emotional well-being. you're going to see so many things wrong with these spaces that we walk in. Please do not try to solve every single one of those issues. Use wisdom, get centered in your purpose and your calling so that you can determine which battles to fight. I see so many young people disheveled. They're trying to take on the whole institution. Everything's wrong with the institution. You can't do that and come out with any kind of sanity. You can't do that and survive. So you have got to figure out what your purpose and your calling is and what is the battle that you are sent here to fight so that you are not punching the air, swinging at every ism, every ill, and figure out where in the fight you belong. That is going to save you mentally. That is going to save you emotionally. It is going to help you balance your well-being as you navigate the difficulties in these spaces. I want to add this piece. We talk a lot about the external things, but I want to add this piece about our personality. So I've taken just about every personality test out there because I learned early on that it was important for me to know who I was so that I know who I was bringing into a space. So I have everything on here up to my zodiac sign, just for fun. But one of the things I learned about my personality that became key to me tailoring my pathway to my personality was that I am someone who really just likes to get the job done. I am more task oriented than I am people oriented. And so I thrive in spaces where we focus on getting the job done. And I struggle in spaces where people want me to do a lot of touchy feely, etc. Now, that's no fault to anyone else. There's nothing wrong with that. But it was important for me to know that I thrive in spaces where I am able to focus on the task. And so the colors test, all of these things you can do online, the disc test, the animal, the compass, really talks about who I am and what I bring into the space. And the other thing about love languages is that we often talk about them in romantic relationships, but I argue that they play themselves out in our workspace relationships. So I'm an acts of service person. That means in my workspace, I actually find value in you getting the job done. And I bond most with people that I build things with. I don't like a lot of small talk chatting, and I don't care about most of that. And so all of this is playing a role in how I view myself in the space, how I view the relationships I build in the space, but it also gives me a sphere of influence in a domain of power. If everything that you are experiencing is externally, somebody made you feel, you're giving all of your power away in spaces. So you got to spend some time developing truth about who you are, your learning style, how you gather information, because there's no power in blaming the teacher. There's no power in blaming your boss. But you know, the power is identifying, okay, what need is not being met? Why am I having friction? Why am I having conflict? What part of me is not vibing in the moment? You can only do that if you've taken the time to study yourself. Because if everything's an ism, you feel powerless in a space. Sometimes it just got personality conflicts going on, regardless of race, gender, and all of those other things. Give yourself room that the conflict or the disruption could be other things. Now, you might land on an ism. It might be race. You might land there, but maybe don't start there. That's a tip I learned from my former supervisor. Don't start there. It's just not best for your social and emotional well-being. So give yourself the power by studying yourself, knowing who you are, knowing what your needs are, and realizing that not in every space you're not going to get those needs met, but you then build community around yourself to get those needs met, recognizing in some spaces you will be slightly deprived. Now, as we come to a close, I want us to remind ourselves the privilege that we sit in, that we are our ancestors' wildest dreams, those in chains, those who survive just because they hoped that generations down we would be where we sit, those who fought and died to open the doors so that we could walk through these programs, that we could even be sitting in spaces like this. My mother was a janitor, housekeeper at a hospital, and I have an office at the top floor of one. We have a debt to pay. We owe them to keep moving forward. We owe every tear that they cried to move forward. And we owe them to take the information that we learn back into our community so that we are lifting as we climb, that we are building as we grow, that we are elevating people who are still yet unable to receive access to these spaces. But one cannot prepare for something while secretly believing that it will never happen. As we think about Nelson Mandela, imprisoned for 27 years, come out to be the president of the country that imprisoned him, you have got to know that progress, as ugly as it is being made. And you have got to believe in a future better than what we are living through right now. When you think about our ancestors on those plantations, somehow having the vision that one day we would be free, that one day we would be liberated. As we continue to move towards liberation, we have got to believe that the future for the generations to come is going to be better in the spaces because we were there. You have to believe that. And that the work that you do matters, that your life matters, that you matter, and that this is not a mistake. It is not an accident. You belong there. You're going to shake things up. I say shake the table, shake the whole damn table. And you keep sitting at it until you're at the head of that table. And you have to believe that that is the future that lies ahead. And even if it doesn't happen in this lifetime, as it did not happen in their lifetime, they paved the way, knowing, believing that the people that will come behind them would have it easier, would have a further leg to run on this, which is truly a relay race. So what baton are you passing for those coming behind you? Because this is what we're doing. I remember, I'll end on this note, Dr. Gloria Lansing Billings, the queen of education. I was in her office lamenting about my experiences as a Black woman in reproductive endocrinology. She listened, and then she got tired of listening. She looked at me and she said, "Are you done?" She said, "This ain't even about you. You are not doing this for you. You are doing this because there is another little Black girl somewhere who needs to see you. You are her hope as someone was your hope." And from that moment on, I complained less. I began to search for my purpose in that space. And I began to see my struggle as an honor, that I was struggling about being a graduate student when my mom was a janitor in that space, that I didn't see the gift of where I had been given. And I urge you as I close to see the gift of the stage that you are in life. It is truly an honor to be where we are, and that we take the power that we're getting, the information that we're getting, and transform it into a form that elevates our communities. Thank you.
Beverly, thank you. Thank you for that message. I am just, again, I told y'all it was gonna be a goosebump situation. And once again, I'm sitting here just completely speechless. Very grateful for your message. It's incredible. So I learned so much about you today, and I have a million questions, but we gonna talk. So I wanna pick your brain about some things that I've seen in the science communication community that I feel like are connected to the messages that you spoke about today. If you are, you may or may not be aware that we have a prominent figure, who shall not be named, okay, because I don't want to make it about naming names, but we have prominent figures who are in the online community supporting science, and these are prominent Black figures, Black people who we've looked up to, and they are not trained scientists. They don't have that background knowledge that we have in science, but they are being called to share scientific information. And lately, I think some people are seeing one person in particular sharing posts that are scientific, but aren't necessarily like, they're not the Eurocentric way of sharing about your understanding of the nature of science. And you can tell that this person is working really hard to make connections to the African diaspora and stories that are told about our history and past in the African continent, and you know, deities and you know, other like magic and things that are like science adjacent. But that's science to them. That's science to them. So how do you see us as a Black science communicator community negotiating with some of our fellow community members who are talking about science in a way that is not traditional and is not widely accepted or necessarily like founded on the scientific method or scientific claims?
Well, I think it's important there's this book I read, and one of the things that it teaches me is to influence the influencer. And so this, whomever this individual is has a platform, and which means that person has. And so the question is, how do you connect with that individual to begin influencing that individual and the followers?
Hold on, it looks like we lost Beverly for a second. Hold on tight. Don't go nowhere. We're gonna get Beverly back in here. But in the meantime, as I'm working to get Beverly back, please put your questions down in the comments section. We are so excited to have Beverly here, and this is your time to pick the brain of a genius. I feel like she is a genius in understanding culture and understanding just how to connect communities, heal, build communities. So Beverly's back, but don't forget, ask your questions in the chat. Hi, Beverly. Sorry about that. Please continue.
More so just really influencing the influencer. Like, how do you connect with that individual and the followers to provide an alternative perspective, but to do it in a way that you build bridges and versus torching them? And I think that can be a bit challenging because we get so passionate about what we're trying to do. But what ultimately what we're all trying to do is elevate our community. And it's a multi-pronged thing. We don't all have to do it the exact same way. We don't all have to agree, but we do need to give people options and let them choose from an educated perspective.
I understand. And that's a really great perspective. We have another question from the chat, and this is from Simon Goring, who asked, what can mentors do to help that next generation?
So the question I asked for someone who wants to be a mentor, particularly if you are not racially congruent with the individual, is have you educated yourself on how to mentor someone from a different background than yours? Because our value systems might be a little different. How we approach the world might be different. The other thing is, are you willing to move from mentor to sponsor? Are you willing to look at the spaces for which you are in and invite them into those spaces so that they can have seats at those tables, so that they can have voices in those rooms? Because I think I'm ready for us to go past the mentorship space and move towards positioning. And so if you are willing to do that, I think I see that largely happening within the white community, where if you see someone that you think is bright and capable, you just kind of start bringing them along to the inner circle of your spaces. And through that, they are able to gain the social capital that comes with the spaces that you are privileged to be in. And so, and I also think it's the inside scoop. What are the truths that you know about a space that the person needs to know? If you see that they are making some mistakes, are you able to gently reroute and guide them. But I do think that it is important. Dr. Angela Byers-Winston at University of Wisconsin-Madison, first African-American woman to be tenured in the Department of Medicine, a good friend. She has a curriculum on mentorship in STEM. I encourage you to look at the work that's out there, as well as Dr. Baranda Montgomery, who has articles written on mentorship in STEM. And I think that people have been writing about this, and that it's important to do the research on how to do this well.
That is a really great point, to always direct people back to research. And just to add on that point, I was in a committee at a university, and it was a diversity committee. And of course, you know, I'm the only minority in the group. And the question came up of, and this was a professor who asked this, by the way. The question was, is there any way for us to learn about Black women's trauma without having to ask Black women about their trauma? And so me being a student who reads and knows that there are academic journals in just an expansive, just crazy spectrum. You can read about anything you want. This professor did not realize that there is an entire body of literature, huge body of literature dedicated to understanding the experiences of Black women. It didn't even cross their minds that there is another way to learn about people's lived experience. So I am the first one to be like, go read about it. You know, we don't have to keep vomiting up our lived experiences for you. We have wonderful, beautiful pieces written about our history and our narratives. So thank you for making that point. Absolutely. There's value in research.
Well, it's also the irony of researchers not using the scientific method when they have a question. And so I'm going to throw it back out to the community that if you want to be respected as a scientist, then that means you use the scientific method all the time and not just for your discipline. The other thing is, that's one of the reasons why I challenge us on using race-based data, that when people are asking questions like that, like base knowledge, as if Black people haven't communicated or contributed to anything, and you present data in front of them, again, where are they getting their information from? They know nothing about us, nor are they putting the effort, the Google search effort, into learning about the literature that have been written in books and departments of African American studies, sociology, anthropology. I mean, there really isn't a limited number of resources to learn about communities that are different from you. The only limitation is yourself, and not actually just Googling this question. And it's really frustrating and disappointing.
It is. But we're going to fix that. Well, maybe we're not going to fix it, but we're going to tell people that they need to do better. And hopefully that'll help them. That'll help them fix it. Woo-wee. Okay, we have another great question. And this is from the Black Science Coalition and Institutes. And we love this logo. That is absolutely fantastic. The question is, this may be a difficult question to answer, but how do we ingrain science in Black culture? I would love to hear your take on this, Beverly.
Well, I think it's already there. It's been there. I have a book called Black Scientists and Inventors. I think it's important to, again, what have we already done? And you'll see that if you were to try to live a day without the things that Black people invented, like this light that I'm using, the computer that I'm using, heat that we use, refrigerator, the fountain pen, I could go on, X-ray glasses, all of these things that we've done. If you ingrain it, we already are in it. And I think it's more of us illuminating the contributions that have already been done so that people can see that we have been scientists and engineers since we've been on this planet. Even before we came to this country, we have been contributing in agriculture. And so I think that, to me, the answer is, and I do this with my K through 12 program. We do like this month is Hispanic Heritage Month. Or was that last month? I can't remember. I don't know what day it is because of the coronavirus. But so each month we try to highlight what cultural contributions to science, technology, engineering, mathematics, and medicine exist historically and currently. And I think for kids and for adults, I just think we don't know. And so we think that science escapes us or that it's something outside of us. And the other thing is, like, if you can't break it down in slang, you don't know it. So I like to make sure I can break science down to a layman's term, because if these words are not part of our lexicon, it's really difficult for us to engage and connect to it, because it seems like it's something outside of ourselves. I'll give a quick example. When I teach the central dogma of biology, RNA, DNA to protein, whatever, DNA, RNA to protein, it's like, what's the body doing? Well, the body has a language. The language comes from its alphabet. And in our body, the alphabet is the amino acids. And just like in our alphabet, depending on how we string those letters together, we get different words. And that's true for our amino acids. Depending on how we string those together, we get different words. And so we talk about transcribing and translating, right? And so we know the word transcribe and translate. So transcribe means to write, translate means to read. And so the body is simply reading and writing, right? Another example, the Golgi apparatus, right? Seems really complicated. That ain't nothing but UPS shipping and packaging. So if you can't break it down to its most simplest parts to show how science is in everyday living, and then to show how we have been involved in the science that is in everyday living, then that is where you lose people. And it's not necessarily making it fun. It's about making it relevant and making it relatable. I can't hear you.
All right, I'm back. It sounds like you have to, the question was, how do we ingrain science in Black culture? You got to be able to understand Black culture first. What languages do we speak? What dialects are we speaking? Who we talking to? Because, I mean, Black culture can be different for many people. I mean, Southern Black culture, mad different from New York City, mad Black culture. So, I mean, like, we are diverse in our own right. And I'm just finding this question very interesting, and your answer is also very interesting. Thank you for that. Another question from Sharia Jones. Okay.
So wait. I got. Okay, Sheree, love you. Sheree is my childhood friend, like baby childhood friend. Sheree has her doctorate degree from Marquette University, and Sheree, mom of 3, is her second-year medical student at Medical College of Wisconsin. Very proud of my friend. I love her. Thanks for being on here.
Yes. Thank you, Sheree. It is my pleasure to have you in our audience, and you're killing it. You're doing it. That is amazing. So your question is, in seeking to design a mentorship program at a PWI, predominantly white institution, should the sponsorship be an open conversation / negotiation for those mentors that are interested?
Oh, that's a great question. And so I'm going to give an unconventional answer. So I have a program with Dr. Jasmine Zapata. And one of the things that we did with the program, ours are the babies, K through 12. We recognized that representation was important for our babies, first and foremost. And we wanted to make sure that the people who were in the program seeking resources, they didn't have another space where they were dealing with microaggressions. And I know people be trying to help, but sometimes we need a little bit of a break from you trying to learn how to relate to us. Some spaces just, it's enough. So we decided that in our program that we were going to make sure that we predominate our mentors that were diverse people that matched the population of the people who were seeking the mentorship. And we rarely deviate from that. And so when it comes to people who are, again, not racially congruent, I do think it's important to vet people, because well-meaning people can harm us. They mean well, but they haven't done the work on themselves. They haven't read the research that's out there on how to be an effective mentor across different spaces of diversity. And I think you should challenge people who, everybody always want to sign up for these programs, but are you going to be good in this space? Are you going to be healthy in this space? And I think you should draft a few questions and ask people to fill out certain questions to see, so that they can decide for themselves whether they are the best in the space, because their position might be better as sponsorship. You know, mentorship is an intimate thing. So maybe they're not ready for that, but maybe they're better as sponsorship, in the sense that they either sponsor with finances and or create space for people like you, the leaders of the program, to have seats at tables and to be speaking in spaces so that your voice and the program is heard. So there are other ways to intersect outside of mentorship. And I think it's important to really distinguish and have people distinguish for themselves. Are you best as a mentor or as a sponsor? And then then give, after they've done their own self-assessment, I think then you'll have your kind of leadership team for the program.
Thank you for that. And that, I mean, mentorship versus sponsorship was among many of my favorite points in everything that you say. It was one of my most favorite, because I think that as we are trying to move forward and have more equity in our world, people are trying to figure out, how do I help? What do I do? And depending on how people try to insert themselves in certain situations, it can be harmful. And I appreciate when people ask and say, how would you like me to be in this space? Is this going to be beneficial to you? And I think putting a name on it, you know, I want to be a mentor versus I want to be a sponsor, meaning like I have some privilege, and I know I have some privilege. And in order for this to be a more equitable world, we have to distribute the power. That's literally what equity is, power distribution. So,
and social capital.
And social capital.
And social capital. And I think when we look at our current seated president of the United States, one of the things I learned from Donald J. Trump is, dude, put your name in the hat. That doesn't qualify for nothing. So I'm telling you, I learned that social capital is more powerful than any degree. When you know people who have access, who have connections, and they can connect you, it will overcome a GPA. It'll overcome an MCAT score. It's something that we think that we have to survive on grit and merit. Please. That current seated president proved to me that this world runs on something else. And so we have got to tap in to these other resources. We be killing ourselves trying to have the perfect grades and all this. And then you realize that George W. Bush went to Harvard. Wait a minute, these people getting in on some money. So it's like, okay, so when you ask, how can you help? Yes, ma'am, or sir, or they or them. What resources do you have that you're willing to share with us? It's not always about you coming in talking. What resources? What's your secret stash that you're not sharing with people? I mean, these are the things that we are often left out of. We know that deals are made on the golf course. Who's been invited to the golf course? And it's metaphorical, but have you been invited to go out for a beer or for a drink with someone where conversations are being had? Are you being invited to the chancellor's home for gatherings? There's all these things happening in academia in corporate America that we aren't invited to. So when people are asking what they can do, yes, invite me to the gala so I can meet and hobnob with some people who have resources. You know what I mean? Call your cronies so that they can bring their sponsorship to our events. So I think we have to think bigger about the secret sauce that runs this country. And it is not always just grit and merit.
I love this. I love this message. And so big, major tips, major bombs left here. Okay, we've all learned something, and I don't see any More questions. Let me just make sure that I got them all. Let me see. Don't want to miss anything. But nothing but positive remarks in the comments. Everybody is so inspired. We love you, Beverly. Thank you for sharing your time and your message with us to kick us off on Black in Science Communication Week. I am ready to disturb the space, okay? We're shaking the tables until we're sitting at the head of the table. Yes, we have some thank yous. Thank you so much from Darth Science. We have Sheree said, love you, Bev. Could not be more thankful for your friendship or more proud of your leadership. And I think that is a great note to leave on. Again, everyone, you can find Beverly online on Twitter at repro_scientist, right, Beverly?
Yes.
And on Instagram at B_biologist?
Yes.
Okay. See, I had that memorized. That's how much I love you. Okay, cool. So I just want to remind people that we have an entire week planned of events for not only Black science communicators, but the entire science communication community. We're amplifying Black voices throughout the week, which is our mission as Black in science communication, but all are welcome to attend these events. But these events will be centered around the Black community. We have tomorrow a workshop for SciCommers who are interested in starting their SciComm career. And then for the rest of the week, we have many other events. We have a Wikipedia page editing workshop. We have an outreach event happening on Saturday. We have an accessibility, inclusion, and representation workshop. We're hearing from experienced science communicators, and we are also hearing from people who do SciComm on social media and science writers and in informal science learning spaces. And we work hard and we play hard too. We have parties and mixers planned throughout the week. We have an old school R&B versus new school R&B rap hip hop and all the shenanigans happening. We also have an alternative music mixer. We have, or party rather, and we also have a Afro-Caribbean Latin party happening. And then we also, of course, have our Black Greek letter organization mixer happening this week. Okay, hold on. Let's
I just want to shout out to my sorors of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated. I wouldn't be who I am without the mentorship that I received from the women who are always about their business.
All right. Yes, we love our Greek letter organizations, our Black Greek letter organizations, the Divine Nine. And since Beverly wanted to shout her org out, I'm going to go ahead and shout mine out. I just want to give a quick shout out to the Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated. And we hope to see the other members of the Divine Nine represented in our mixer. I can't wait to see who in SciComm and who in the science space in general is in a D9 organization. I'm very excited about that. So very happy that you're here, Beverly. I'm like even more amped up and excited just knowing that you're in a D9. That's really cool. And you also have a soror here in the chat. We have Curly Scientist here.
Okay. Hey, Curly Scientist. Hey, soror.
Yes, that is so cool. So cool. Okay, we see you, Crimson and Cream. We see you. All right. Well, with that being said, we're going to sign off. I had a wonderful time here with you today, Beverly. And we hope you can stick around for the rest of Black and SciComm Week.
I will be at these events. I'm really looking forward to it. And thank you all for inviting me into this community.
Of course. We would not have it without you. So, okay. Goodbye, everybody. Thank you so much for coming. And make sure you visit blackinscicomm.com. I'm going to put that here for you to see, so that you can register for events that are happening throughout the week and stay updated on any news that we have to share. And also, if you would like to donate to our cause, you can go to the website as well. See you soon. Bye.